Hey, what's up, DLLS Mavs Nation? It's your man, Kevin Gray of DLLS Mavs on DLLS Sports. Really appreciate you joining us here for our latest video as we get you ready for the Mavericks taking on the Denver Nuggets in their third NBA Cup game as the Mavericks look to improve to 2-1 in Cup play so far. I had to go behind enemy lines to talk about the matchup between the Mavericks and the Nuggets. And, of course, I had to bring in my teammate with the All-City Network. You can catch him every day with his guy, Tim Legler, on the All NBA podcast, part of the All City Network. Adam Mares is joining me here on DLLS Sports. Adam, what's going on?
I'm happy to be on with you and happy to be on with DLLS, our first matchup of the year. I'm excited.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Glad to be able to do this with you and talk a little Mavericks Nuggets basketball. Of course, these two teams got together back on November the 10th, and the Mavericks lost that game 122-120. Yeah, Michael Porter Jr., he hit a bucket with 6.5 seconds left to give the Nuggets the win that night. Kyrie Irving missed a three with a couple seconds left. That would have been the game winner. And what was a fantastic game between these two teams, a competitive one. And unfortunately, at least for our side, as we'll get started here, Luka Dončić, as reported by our own Mark Stein, is going to be out at least a week due to a right wrist injury. So unfortunately, no Luka in this game. Your reaction, Adam, to that news, particularly in the injuries that we've seen so far in the league that have really been taking a toll on a lot of teams across the league so far?
Well, the reaction is it's a bummer because the Nuggets and I think the Mavs are both kind of in the same situation. The Mavs have been on the wrong end of a lot of really close games, so their record, suffers. I think even the vibe with the fan base probably suffers a little bit more. But both teams, if you look at it so far, championship aspirations, especially in the Western Conference, getting out of the Western Conference, but haven't put together a stint yet that makes you believe that. I think everybody kind of knows the talent is there for both teams, but they don't really believe it. So tonight, before the news came out, I'm sitting here thinking this is great because one of these teams is going to come out of this game feeling really good about themselves, with a little bit of momentum. But now without Luka, if Dallas wins, obviously I think they'll feel that way. But if Denver wins now, you almost chalk it up to like, okay, you have to win at home when the other team is missing their star player. So changes the complexion of the game quite a bit, but still interesting, both teams.
Yeah, of course, the Mavericks are 8-7 right now, had lost 4 straight games and now won their last 3 games, including a nice win on the road against the Oklahoma City Thunder before blowing out the New Orleans Pelicans a couple of days ago. And for you guys, I mean, a tough start losing the first 2 games of the year, but then go 5-0 on a homestand, which included that win over the Mavericks in that NBA Cup game as well, 5-2 at home, but have lost 2 of 3. Now, of course, that kind of coincides with the absence of Nikola Jokic, but at the same time, how did the Nuggets turn this around after initially what was a tough start to them to really get themselves back in it here?
Well, they turned it around behind Nikola Jokic. And I think there was a moment. So the Nuggets get blown out by the Thunder in game 1. Thunder clearly out the gate, one of the best teams in the NBA, if not the best team. So Denver gets blown out, wake-up call. Then you go up against the Clippers, and I think that it's a new roster for Denver. There's less shooting, but there is some more other pieces. And I think halfway through that game against the Clippers in game 2, Jokic looked around and was like, okay, this team's different than previous years. We got to figure out who we are. And until we do, I'm going to have to go into super, MVP mode. Not just play great basketball, but I'm going to have to be super aggressive and carry this team until we figure it out. And they ended up coming short in that game because James Harden got a BS foul call at the last. He didn't even make a basket. He got the classic reach your arm in and throw the ball. If they call a foul, they win the game. But I think from that halftime of the second game on, Jokic looked at the team and was like, I got to be different. I got to carry. And he has. He's played arguably the best basketball of his career over the next, I think it was 10 games, carried them, really, really elevated the team. And over that time, in carrying, in being hyper aggressive, it was almost like every other player was able to take a breath and settle in. We got the big fella carrying us, so I can focus on the foundation of what I got to do. And guys like Peyton Watson, Julian Strawther, Christian Braun in particular, all those young guys who are new pieces, they slowly started to figure out where they fit into this equation. So you ask what turned it around. I think it was that Jokic shouldering the burden and everybody else taking a breath and figuring out where they belong in the ecosystem.
And of course, Nikola Jokic playing at an MVP-like level, always a favorite, has won 3 of the last 4 MVPs, playing this early season like he's trying to win a 4th and 5 based on the way that he's been playing so far this year.
He does not, though. I tell you that right now. I mean, I know it's funny and it becomes cliche. People joke, does he even like basketball? He loves basketball. I don't think he wants to be the MVP. I don't think he's ever wanted to be. I think he wants to be recognized, as the best player because I think he believes he is. But the whole idea of Jokic is more so than any other player I've ever covered is a true believes it's a team sport. And so he knows he's the best player. He knows he has this responsibility and stuff, but he hates when the conversation becomes about him because rightfully so. There's people doing the dirty work for him. And there's this level of don't give me the appreciation. We got guys over here that only get 6 shots a game that are doing the rebounding. So the funny thing is he threw the MVP back in 2023. It was kind of funny. He stopped shooting for like 10 games just to say, hey, man, I don't want this. But right now at the gate, he's just doing what he had to do. I honestly don't think he wants the MVP.
That's interesting because, my gosh, he will remain in that conversation year after year just based on how terrific of a player that he is. You started to mention some of the young guys for the Nuggets, and one guy in particular who his career, his average scoring each year continues to go up, and I'm talking about Christian Braun, who's so far this year averaging over 16 points per game, shouldering a much bigger offensive load for this team. What have you thought about the way he's continued to grow in his game and what they're asking from him night in and night out and how he has responded so far to that challenge?
Christian Braun has been one of the stories of the season for the Nuggets. You obviously lose KCP, who we know works and won a championship with him in that role. And you bring in a new player who I think the metrics last year showed that he works. But when you haven't seen it, with heavy minutes, you always wonder. But here's the thing about Christian Braun. He won a championship in high school. He won a championship in college. Won a championship his first year in the NBA. The guy is the definition of a championship piece, in my opinion, because he is a guy that doesn't need or want anything outside of his role. But what's nice about the Denver Nuggets, especially when Nikola Jokic is on the court, is if guys do their role, Jokic will figure out how to maximize that role. Like, oh, this is what you do. You cut really well. You defend in this way really well. All right, I'm going to mold my game to you. And so far, how you screw that up is by coloring outside the lines. I think Christian Braun is the ultimate player that will never color outside the lines. Jokic loves those types of players. And as a result, we came into the year saying, can he average 10 points a game? Can he average 10? Just you pick up a little offensive rebound here, you hit a corner 3 there, whatever. That hasn't been the case. He's cutting, he's scoring in transition, he's doing other things that we knew he could do. We just didn't know he could do them consistently. But again, none of it is coloring outside the lines. I don't know if he has taken a single shot this season that I've looked at and said, that's not your shot. He just plays his system, his style of ball. Jokic finds him, and it turns out that's 15 points a game right there.
He's the opposite of that Patrick Ewing famous video. Do you work on the shot? You don't work on that shot. Right. Christian Braun works on what he does and sticks to what he does and does it very well. And I'm sure for Michael Malone, of course, the head coach of this team, a player like that, knowing his role and understanding it helps out his team because, you guys have been missing Aaron Gordon for quite some time. What has his absence meant for this team and how they've been able to supplement what he does from both offense and defense, his activity on the glass and everything else? How has this team been able to manage without a very important piece for them so far this year?
Well, in some ways, AG's absence has been a blessing in disguise because Aaron Gordon is perhaps the quintessential Jokic player, just like we're talking about with Christian Braun. Aaron Gordon comes from Orlando to Denver, and he says, okay, where do I fit into this team? Not what I did before, but what do I do? And over the years, his chemistry with Jokic is unparalleled. He's does his job at a high level. So you almost don't need to see AG for, you can afford to say, I'll bet when he comes back, he fits right back into his role. He knows what he's doing. But now it opened up an opportunity for other guys to fill the role that he was playing, namely Peyton Watson, and do it in a different way. Peyton Watson's tall, athletic, and skinny. Aaron Gordon's more stocky, obviously hyper athletic as well. But if he did not exit for these last handful of games, Peyton Watson is probably not sharing the court with Jokic nearly as much. Now he's starting. So it almost accelerated his development that was very important to the Nuggets. They needed to get reps with Peyton Watson on the court, but especially on the court with Jokic. And now he's getting those in spades. And what do you know? First 5 games of the year, Aaron Gordon's healthy, Peyton Watson off to a shaky start. Since going into the starting lineup, all of a sudden, just like Christian Braun, just do your job, color inside the lines, and you're going to get 15 points a night. And that's exactly what's happening with him. And it's been great to see. Your question now, and Aaron Gordon's going to miss for a little bit longer. I think the Nuggets are going to be slow with that hamstring injury, and he personally is going to be slow with coming back from it. But now you look at it and you go, this is a chance to get rhythm for the entire year. When Aaron Gordon comes back, does the stuff that you were successful with Jokic, does that translate to the non-Jokic minutes, as you increase those? That's a big question that I don't know the answer to, but I think for Peyton Watson, confidence is up. understanding what it is that he contributes to this team is up. And it's really, and the Nuggets have been winning outside of this last little bit where Jokic has obviously been out. They've been winning. And I think that it's a really positive sign and something that's needed. An 82-game season, those are the little boxes you want to see checked along the way. And we're early, and that box is, I don't want to say checked, but, we're going to check it with pencil. And we'll come back on pen here if Aaron Gordon returns and he's still playing well.
Yeah, the Mavericks are looking to have to do some of the same with some of the injuries that they have been dealing with early on in this year. PJ Washington missing some time with a knee injury. Obviously, Luka Dončić is going to be out now for the next week with the wrist injury as well. The Mavericks have been battling some of the injuries of their own to try to patch things up as things go on. A guy like Quentin Grimes is going to be asked to have a much bigger role on this team over the next week or so. A guy who's got at least 10 points in 3 out of his last 4 games. His presence is going to be interesting. So the reason why I bring him up is the different pieces that both of these teams have and how they've had to work with the injuries that they dealt with. The Mavericks, who got off to a little bit of a rough start, losing 4 straight games, have now been able to bounce back. Denver, slow start, but also been able to work through it as well. It seems like both teams are starting to find their footing a little bit, even with the adversity that they're dealing with from an injury standpoint so far.
For sure. I mean, I think with Dallas, though, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I watch them, I probably caught half of their games. They're one of the teams I catch the most because I enjoy watching them. Obviously, Legs loves them, so we watch them a lot, and they're an interesting storyline. But I think for Dallas, I still don't know what they are. And I guess you could say that for Denver as well. But they don't. I think they are further back in the process of figuring out, okay, it's new players. It feels like it's the same system, right? Luka, Kyrie, and now we have some spacers. But everybody's a little bit different. Tim Hardaway Jr. is different from Klay Thompson. I know that's not the perfect comp there. Derek Jones Jr. and Najee Marshall are different than what they had before, what they have now. So I think that they're still trying to figure out how those pieces fit together. But one criticism I personally have, and I know Legs has had it of Luka, is what I just said about Jokic. Okay, we don't know who we are right now, so I've got to be ready to carry us until we figured it out. I think that's the biggest thing I would say about the Mavs right now is I don't know that Luka is either capable or necessarily taking on the ownership of that responsibility. And maybe, all young players kind of learn lessons along the way. Maybe that's a lesson he's learned from this first month of, all right, when a team's trying to figure out who they are, the star player has to kind of carry and shoulder the load. He's talented enough to do it, but I don't think he's done an A+ job of that in the first month.
Yeah, I think part of that is his body hasn't allowed him to. I mean, he started the season with the calf injury, obviously dealing with, the knee injury as well. And now he's got a wrist injury, obviously, that just popped up. But as he's tried to work his way into the kind of game shape that will allow him to carry that load as consistently as we've seen him do in the past, it just hasn't been that way. And it's been an up and down and uneven start for him offensively. We saw in the game against the Pelicans, he was able to get locked in a little bit more defensively, had a few steals in that game. But you're right, the rhythm just hasn't necessarily been there. And when you don't have that consistency in the continuity of the lineup being shuffled in and out with different guys dealing with injury, it makes for an uneven start. And we were hoping, with this 3-game run that they were on, getting ready to play 7 of the next 9 games on the road, starting with Denver, that finally they could build some of that chemistry, continuity, consistency, all the C words you want to come up with. That was hopefully going to be the case moving forward. But now with the injury, they're kind of back to square one, and Kyrie Irving now is going to have to be the guy at 32 years of age is going to have to shoulder the load for the next however long here. And offensively, he's going to have to be the guy that the Mavericks look to really not only steady the offense, but really be the guy that is the go-get-it guy offensively while also getting everyone else involved as well.
And I'm curious how he does at that. Denver has the interesting dynamic, too, where Yoke's the leader in a lot of ways, but he's not the leader in all ways. And I imagine Dallas is very similar. And this might be an opportunity for Kyrie to establish some other parts of leadership that'll serve the team later on. Like, okay, can he be the guy that steadies the ship? It gives him a new look. Like even tomorrow night against Denver's still figuring out who they are. Well, you game plan for a team with their best player. That's that. Okay, we know who they are. You change things. And I honestly believe that in the NBA, a shorthanded team that is still talented can sometimes be as dangerous on a one-off game, not a playoff series or anything like that, but on a one-off game in the middle of a season, it can almost be an advantage because we know how we're going to play. That team has no idea how we're going to play because we don't play this way very often. But I think it is an opportunity. I will say, I just look at the schedule because you brought it up. I didn't realize they had a bunch of road games. The NBA is doing this a lot this year, and I actually hate it. 3-game road trip, 1 game back, 2-game road trip, 1 game back, 2-game road trip. That basically is a 10-game road trip. Because it's still travel. You're traveling home and away, like home for one off game, and then you're out. So that just becomes one stop on an extended trip. And I think that's really tough. So this next 10 games, Dallas, I think, is going to have a real challenge on their hand.
Yeah, we'll see if they're able to meet that challenge, especially without their superstar. You're right in terms of the one-off games. Oklahoma City Thunder found that out this past Sunday. PJ Washington, who loves playing in Oklahoma City, had 27 and a career-high 17 rebounds. So maybe that formula can carry over where, hey, you don't know necessarily for Denver what you're going to get in terms of without Luka Dončić. We'll see what kind of wrinkles that the Mavericks are able to come up with when they take on Denver on Friday night. Should be a fun one when these two teams get together. Always a competitive game, just like we saw in the first matchup. Hopefully the same, even without Luka Dončić on the Mavericks side. Adam, really appreciate the time, man. Love what you're doing every single day with our guy Tim Legler as well, the All NBA podcast, part of the All City Network. You can catch these guys multiple times a week, of course, part of the All City Network with the All NBA podcast. Adam, I appreciate the time, man. Thank you so much, and thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me on. By the way, Legs on the call for that game. And you guys, Mavs fans, shout him out on social media. Let him know he's been a Mavs guy. He was early on it. So give him some love and tune in for sure, because he's going to be calling some interesting stuff.
Awesome, man. We'll appreciate it, man. We'll talk to you soon. Appreciate you joining us here on DLLS Sports. Make sure you subscribe, like, and comment for us here at DLLS Sports here on YouTube. And we'll talk to you later. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.